The land was part of our story, always.
Reading the gospel, it was written by people who lived here. So that when you come here and you smell everything and you see everything, you're looking and smelling at exactly the same thing that they did.
This land of milk and honey, the promised land, when you read those words, you always have this expectation of it being a welcoming and inviting land. The reality of it is, it's far from it.
If we won't have new generations of farmers, we won't have people that this land will be their life mission, these open areas, we will be in trouble. So instead of escape from it, get back to it, deeper to it, to your story.
The land of the Bible, the Holy Land. The land that God has promised to the people of Israel. When we think about the term the land, it's not just any land. The mountain in the north, the Sea of Galilee, all the way down to the deserts of Judea, the Dead Sea, and the mountains of Jerusalem. God will bring the people of Israel into the land. The land is a symbol of a blessing of God. And we know under the new covenant, the covenant of Messiah, we are called to enter into His land. Let us watch together how God fulfilled His promises to the people of Israel in His land, not just any land, in His land, the land of Israel.
The land of Israel has drawn attention from people all over the world for millennia. If you want to understand this fascination with Israel, you need to get to know the land itself.
This is our homeland. This is the land of our fathers. This is the place that throughout history we've fought for, we've protected, we've appreciated the beauty of. This is the story of our connection to this land. People always ask this question of why Israel? Like you're this tiny country in the middle of the Middle East. How does so much happen here now? And how has so much always happened here historically?
2/3 of the gospel was written here, right by this shoreline. This is basically where it all began.
You open the Bible and you read the stories of the places where you are standing right now. You cannot ignore that.
You don't belong to a place unless you're part of making it what it is.
You see villages that actually abandoned huge amounts of land. Abandoned. My grandparents, there was dream about this state. I want to keep it safe. We will unite ourselves through the land, and the connection to the land will be part of our identity.
Ronnie, you've been bringing people to Israel and taking them around this country for a very long time.
33 years.
That's a good amount of time.
I met with Ronnie Cohen. He's been a tour guide in Israel for many, many years and has a deep knowledge of the land he calls home.
Okay, basically, somebody gets on a plane, they come to Israel, they get on a bus, and they're expecting to see sand dunes and Arabs on camels all over the place. Okay. I think the best way to really talk about the land is talk about physically what the land looks like. This is the Middle East, but it's not like you see on TV like Afghanistan or Iraq. It's a little bit different. First of all, we're not in a continent that's called the Middle East. We're in Asia. Actually, we're in Western Asia along the Mediterranean coast. We're a small nation, about the size of New Jersey. The width of Israel is only 70 miles. You can drive in about 90 minutes. And the length of it is about 230 miles. That's really about it. We're boundaried in the north by Lebanon, the northeast Syria, which is right behind me. Jordan is the longest border that we have, going all the way down south to the Red Sea between us and Egypt. The Red Sea, by the way, is an outlet to the Far East. It was a port that was opened up by King Solomon 3,000 years ago. We connect 3 continents. This is a land bridge. We are a land bridge. This is the cradle of civilization. Because we have a 120-mile coastline, that coastline became a very, very important trade route. At some point, about 2,000 years ago, the Romans will nickname that. We can read about that in Matthew. It talks about the way of the sea, the Via Maris. Every conqueror who came to this land knew that anyone who controlled that route will control commerce. And whoever controls commerce will control money. And whoever has money has power. This is the most fought-over piece of real estate in the world.
Israel sits in such a unique location geographically. And that geographic location helps us understand why it's such an important place spiritually.
When Jesus begins his ministry, why in the world did he go to this small fishing village right on the shores of the Sea of Galilee to make that his base of operations for nearly 3 years? There had to be a reason.
I don't know.
First of all, he's a grassroots kind of guy. That's why he stayed away from the big cities. But I think the main reason is, for the 3 years of ministry here, everyone came to him. How did they hear about him? He needed some kind of a communications network. The Via Maris. The Via Maris passed right in front of the town.
Close to the road.
Merchants, travelers, anyone, either coming down from the north or coming up from the south, would have had to hear about the wonders or even witness the miracles of Christ at Capernaum. That's why everyone knew about him.
When you travel through Israel, and I love traveling the land with my family, it seems like we as a nation, we're always investing in making this place look more beautiful and in planting and, and cultivating what this land has.
Being that this is a land ridge and a land that was always in turmoil because everybody wanted to control the trade routes, there were many wars. And every army that came and attacked, whenever they besieged the city, what they would do is they would chop down all the trees. They needed the wood for making weapons, for siege machines. And then over those thousands of years of warfare, no one's bothered to replenish the trees. So for the last 100 years or so, there's always been Jewish organizations that took care of our own.
The restoration of the land is a deep and important part of our history and identity here. But today, within the country, there is a concern that the next generation is losing touch with that part of our story. It's not clear who will take up the mantle to care for the land.
We're in northern Israel, and we're about to meet with Yoel Zilberman. Yoel is the co-founder of HaShomer HaChadash. They're helping to safeguard and protect the lands of this country. In fact, you could even say that they're some of the people at the forefront of maintaining and preserving this land of Israel. So let's start from the beginning. Why did you start HaShomer HaChadash?
Actually, I grew up not far away from here, and I grew up as a shepherd. And we have a ranch, we have cows and sheep. And criminals from the village nearby, a Bedouin family, they tried to take over my father's fields, cutting all the fences that keeping the cows. They burned my father's fields like arsons every night. After sitting with the police officer of the whole region that told my father, listen, I suggest you give them some part of your land or give them some protection money. I can't help you.
But just to point out what you're saying, this was such a widespread issue up here. It's not only can we not help this specific case, we're not even trying to help this general problem.
When it just started, we're sitting together on the Shabbat table, and he told the family, listen, it's better to have a shoe store in the mall than to fight for our land every day. I'm all alone.
Who's saying this, your father?
My father. My brother and I, we both was in the service in the army. And I told my father, listen, over my dead body, it's not going to happen. And I went back to my unit, and one of my officers gave me a very big Israeli flag. And the next Friday, I built a small tent, long stick with the flag, 40 books, 2 beds, and I moved to live on this hill. After a month and a half that I lived on this hill, more than 40 people came and became my small community that surround me and told me, we are going to protect your father. So after 4 months, more than 100 farmers from all over the state of Israel, from the south, from the north, from all over came. They was telling me that they actually, many of them already abandoned big amounts of their land because of agri-terrorism. Actually, agri-terrorism, people that burning their fields, people that trying to take over their fields. You need to imagine, Israel, it's a very small country. We are very strong in the borders, but inside our country, we lost control. We established the organization in the 12th of April, 2007. In 1909, in the 12th of April, the same day, there was establishment of organization that's called HaShomer, 98 years before.
HaShomer, or the Watchman in English, was an organization founded to protect Jewish people settling in Palestine. It was soon disbanded and replaced with a more formal paramilitary organization. But in 2007, Yoel saw the need to revive it, and he founded HaShomer HaChadash, the new Watchman.
These people came first time from Europe. It was the first time that they walked the land and also protected themselves since 2,000 years before.
So the early settlers, the Jewish people, come back to the land, and in the late 19th century, they start buying back lands in the land of Israel. And even though they were the legal owners of much of these lands, the people working the fields were attacked by the Arabs living in the neighborhood and others. And here you are, 100 years later, you own the land legally, the State of Israel is an established institute, and at the same time, the people working these very lands are suffering from the same problem.
I told myself, we are not creating something new. No, actually, there is nothing new under the sun.
So I wanted you to describe what we're going to see in just a bit. Maybe give us an idea of what you're doing.
Okay, great. So first of all, you're going to meet now our special missions groups taking care to the forests in Israel. Every day, all over the Galilee, the Negev, cleaning, digging, planting, keeping from fires. And after that, in the night, you're going to meet our volunteers that do the night patrols. You will see the deep connection between being in the day with the farmer and making sure that in the night his farm will be safe.
So, Benaya, tell me what these people are doing.
So we're part of a program called the Forest Keepers. We help preserve forests all around the country. We plant new trees, we take care of them.
We have 12 teams that are working all over Israel, from Eilat till Golan Heights.
I think throughout the last few years, there's been awakening throughout the youth, understanding that we're kind of losing grasp over all the work. People feel like they need to get more involved. And this is not something that usually young people would work in this kind of work. It's very physical, it's very difficult, it's exhausting, but they feel like it's a call. It's a calling for them.
Yedid, do you want to tell us why you came to this project to be part of it?
Because I wanted to be part of something big, because of the sense of mission, and I really like the work outdoors. You know, you can't feel your shoulders or your back, but you sit on your beach chair, and you feel so satisfied that I can't explain it. And this feeling makes me feel that what I do is really important to me, to the forest, to the country.
Restoring the connection to the land has always been a big part of this story. God, in fact, promises us that the Jewish people will return to the land. But He never said it would be easy. Coming back to this land, reclaiming the land, turning it green and beautiful and abundant the way it is today was never something that came without hardship and challenges. But for the people of Israel, we have always been up to that challenge. Hey, Yuval.
Hi.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
You're responsible for the protecting side of things.
Yeah, you can say so. We are trying to help the farmers in Israel. We're a bunch of guys working the HaShomer HaChadash, trying to do a bit good. We're working 365 days a year because we don't know when the next terror attack will come.
And what's the effect of that been? How much of a difference does that make?
Around 90% less of the stealing and the hurting of the farmers were we protecting.
But they're just showing presence, and
Yep.
that's
Yeah,
enough to make a
exactly.
difference.
These volunteers guard the land day and night, and it was my turn to join them on the night patrol.
So let's start with a question of what brings all of you from Haifa to the middle of the mountains out on a cold night.
Everybody of us has another profession, but we are jeep riders. We are preventing the crime by being here.
Who are the criminals that you see?
Most of them are people who come from Arab village from the area, and they come and steal cows and food from the plantation. If we just drive around the field and they saw that there is somebody who guard, and they leave it, go back home. It's not just to help the farmer, it's also education for the next generation. If my sons saw it, I think they will behave the same when they grow up.
These are the values that are taught in this land: to appreciate what God has given us, to learn about our country, to work the land, to protect it, and to love the homeland that God has given us.
We have here everything that someone is looking for. Doesn't make it different what faith you are, but everything is here.
It doesn't matter where we are coming from. It doesn't matter what is our ideology. The idea is to use the land as the place where you and I can be united through.
The land belongs to everyone. I want to make sure that before I leave, that the land will be ready for the next generations.
This is our holy land. There's nothing quite as satisfying as walking through the land of Israel in all its glory. especially in good company.
Chaim, how's it going, man?
Hey, man. What's up?
It's good to see you.
That's why I joined Chaim Birenbaum, a local believer,
We're gonna hike this valley into the woods up to Jerusalem.
Let's go.
for a journey along Shvil Israel, the Israel Trail.
Let's take a look and see where we really are.
The Israel Trail starts in the north of Israel and down
So
there.
all the way on the Lebanese border.
Yeah, and it goes all the way to Eilat in the south, and that covers around 600 miles. It usually takes a person about 2 months to hike the whole trail.
You just hiked on this trail.
Yeah.
Was it full of people when you hiked on
Oh,
this?
it was packed. Every night we had about 30 people with us at the campsite. People we've never met before, everywhere.
So you're telling me, Chaim, that the Israel Trail has a specific meaning to the blaze.
Yeah, you can actually see it right here. The orange is actually the desert. That's where we're heading now. The blue is the sea, and the white is the mountains of the north. When we start from the north, you go through the mountains to the coastline and to the deserts. In such a small country, you see everything. And that's the way Israel is. It's such a small country, but it has everything. You'll know the country when you walk it. You'll know it by your feet. There's this historical connection that I feel when I'm walking here. As an Israeli, I feel like I'm walking,
I'm rooted in this land.
Yeah, there's something which I can't even explain sometimes.
I think about this when I encounter other Israelis on the top of a mountain or at a stream with my kids, where we're walking the land that our fathers were in thousands of years ago, and we were just scattered around the world. And my parents came back, my father from Iran, my mother from Eastern Europe, and we're all back in the same land, as if no time has passed. The minute you have to explain why you care about this place, it immediately becomes apparent that it's more than the beauty of one hill or the story of one hill. It's the fact that we've been here for so long.
And that's what brings people together here. Now we're gonna do one thing that's probably the most important part of the trail.
What's that?
All the historical stuff, spiritual stuff, is drinking coffee on the trail. That's why it takes so much time to hike it. We drink coffee all day, so.
I think that's a common problem in this country.
Yeah.
Love that sound.
Every Israeli has their own method of making coffee, and it's the best method in the world. They got it from this guy in the army. I as well have my own recipe.
So do I. I'm sure yours is too the best.
Mine is the best.
What an incredible coincidence. Oh, that looks good.
Here you go.
Best part of the day.
Yeah, definitely. Tell me how it is.
First, the smell. That's good.
I think any coffee you drink with this view.
With this view?
Even my coffee is good in this view.
I think we often forget how privileged we are to be back in this land.
Just a few dozens of years ago, people were longing to sit like we're sitting here in this freedom in this land. And I think also sitting here as Jewish believers in Jesus in this land, being in the promised land and being able to worship freely here and share Jesus, it's just, amazing.
It's easy to lose touch with how many miracles, how many sacrifices, how much change needed to happen for me to be sitting here tonight in the land that God intended for us. That's something quite incredible.
Yeah.
Shalom, everybody. With us today we have Dr. Erez Soref. Dr. Erez Soref is the president of One for Israel and also the president of the Israeli Bible College in Israel, probably one of the only Bible college for Israelis. Shalom and welcome to our show. Erez, when we talk about the land of the Bible, the land of Israel, the land, what's the first thing that comes into your mind?
I think it's the words heritage and rejuvenation. Think of our families that have been away from the land for so long and have returned some 100, 200 years ago, and to a land that was barren, and now the desert is blooming. Even if we look outside this very window, In 1867, Mark Twain, the famous author, American author, he came and did a tour in the Holy Land. And he said, the land is desolate, it's unattractive, unlovely, was his word. There was nothing here. There was no trees, no nothing. He says the hills are barren. I think it's symbolic that it was in 1867. We look outside the walls and we see in 1967, Jerusalem has united. There's tremendous development on multiple levels. Our life and existence here is not an accident. It's something that God ordained for us, and that as a nation and as an individual, we have a purpose. And every time we look outside the window, that reminds us of that.
Let's talk about how Israel was before,
Yes.
100 years, 70 years, and today. Why it's so important to preserve the land?
Something deeply ingrained in us as the Jewish people is caring for the land. We've not done that. We're not allowed to work the land much
In the diaspora.
Yeah. And so when we come back, I remember my grandfather, he was starting to be a lawyer. Before he immigrated, his sister came. She was, working in a kibbutz. She wrote him, she says, who needs another Jewish lawyer? There's so many lawyers. Come and work the land. So my father left whatever he was doing, and he came, and he was a farmer. This is the ethos of Israel.
And that's a part of the fulfillment of prophecy.
And definitely it is. I mean, we read in Jeremiah 31, in verse 5, God says that part of his promise to our nation is that the land is going to flourish again.
There's no doubt that the change is on all the levels.
Yeah.
The immigration, the technology, agricultures, and you mentioned the spiritual.
It's inseparable. And we see that already when God spoke to Ezekiel in chapter 37 and the valley of the dry bones, and he say, can those bones live? And God told symbolically to Ezekiel to prophesy over the bones. Now, it's interesting. He told him to prophesy 2 times. The first time, we read that the bones came together and the skin came over, and it was like this huge valley covered with dead bodies. And then he says, now pray a second time so that my spirit will come into them. And when he does, then there's life coming into all those dead bodies, as it were. And alongside, I think we see that alongside the physical rejuvenation of the state of Israel, the economic and technological and all that, we also see a spiritual revival. The average person on the street, the average Jewish person on the street today, may not know a whole lot about Yeshua, but he heard of this phenomenon of more and more Jewish people turning to learn more about him. There's going to be a spiritual blessing that once again as a nation, we stand in our calling to bless all the other nations. So all those things and more are coming.
And to that I can say only amen.
Amen.
Dr. Erez Soref, thank you very much.
Thanks, Shmulik.
Great having you. God bless you.
God bless.
Thank you for joining us as we provide a spiritual insight of what God is doing in Israel and in the Middle East. If you want to learn more about what God is doing in Israel, make sure to visit us on our webpage and follow us on social media. Shalom, and God bless you from Jerusalem.